I am super happy to introduce to you Brit, who is going to be talking about DevOps is not a factory.
All right. Almost there. I think we're good. You all can hear me? All right. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to all of the amazing sponsors and the organizers for putting this event together. It's so great to see so many faces in one place. This is actually my largest in-person talk since pre-COVID. So we're all going to go on this journey together, everybody, yeah? So my name is Brit Myers. I'm the VP of Engineering at System Initiative. I'm a software engineer by trade, and I've been building engineering teams for the last decade, predominantly in the B2B space. DevOps is not a factory, but what is a factory, yeah? So, you know, somebody does a thing and there's outputs, and sometimes the outputs change, right? But really, you know, all modern software development ideas derive from factory optimization in some day. I mean, Deming, Lean, and Six Sigma, Agile, the words are the same, that we've stolen all of the words in the literature directly from manufacturing and applied them to much of software development. Value stream mapping as an example, and let's think about what makes a factory great. And so, spoiler, I recently got my MBA, and in that class I took operations management, and so we're all going to take a little bit of operations management 101 together. So this slide is ripped directly from my course notes, and this is how do you measure the performance of your operations management, mostly, you know, predominantly factory setting. So if you start on the left, you look at financial measures, right? Profits, yeah, we want to make money, right? ROI, we were talking about ROI, ROA, return on assets, a little bit different, same idea. Cash flow, can we pay the bills, right? And then there's customer priorities, right? Everything has a price. Our goal is to make a thing at a price point that somebody's willing to pay for in the time frame that they want to purchase it with the level of quality that they expect, right? Now let's look at the sort of operational measures, right? There's some consistent terms in here: throughput, flow time, inventory, process cost. And so don't worry, there will not be a quiz here. But again, these are just ripped directly from our operations management book, right? Throughput, the rate of goods or products, like how many things are flowing through the system. Flow time, how long does something take from start to end, right? Inventory, like this matters less in our world, right? Because if you think about manufacturing and you're building cars, all those cars you're not selling, they have to sit somewhere, and you have to pay for something to sit somewhere, right? And all of these operational measures are concerned only with outputs. Outputs, like what's the thing that you're producing? What's you know, we've evolved from sort of lines of code to story points to t-shirt sizes to all sorts of things, but they're all concerned with outputs. And so even when you think about how we explain and how we work through what do we do to improve operations, what are we trying to do? We decrease lead time. We're trying to reduce inventory, decrease variability, right? You don't want as many defects. You don't want to buy a car and then immediately have to take it back to the lot, right? Decreasing defects, removing bottlenecks, these are all the same concepts. And so wait a second, is DevOps a factory? Like the words are the same, the ideas are the same. Don't we talk about the same things? And we do in many ways, of course, right? In all places where there is process, you want to optimize the process. You want to reduce bottlenecks. You want to reduce constraints. But let's shift for a bit here and now think about what makes a product engineering org great. And what I'd like to sort of do, and as I'm sort of running through this, the comparison I'd like you all to be thinking about is it enough to say that DevOps is not a factory? And what does that mean in terms of how we build teams? So, for a second, if you want to close your eyes, you can do so. But just think about the best team you've ever been on. Like the very, very best team that you've ever been on. I'll give you a couple seconds. Think about the people. Think about the interactions. Think about what you were doing together. Think about what made it the best team. Chances are high that that team that you thought of were highly aligned, that you had high autonomy, that you were empathetic, not only towards each other, but also with the teams and parts of the organization sort of around you. You were all honest with each other, and you trusted each other, right? Yeah, you communicated, you had shared purpose, and more often than not, that team existed for quite some time, and I bet sometimes you wish you could go back to that team if you're no longer working with that team, right? And so when you think about a product team, there's that arrow in the middle with outputs. That is what we do. We produce things, we make things, we build things, we fix bugs, we write tickets, we ship features, we ship fixes, we solve incidents. All of those are the output of what that team does together, but what matters more is the outcome, okay? And again, none of this is new, right? Outputs versus outcomes. We've been around the block here a number of times, right? Outputs, they're easy to measure and they're in your control. Like you have control over whether or not you type that line, or whether or not you decide to work on, whatever the next feature is. But outcomes are hard to control, or hard to measure, and they are out of your control, right? Like there's only so much you can do you just give it the best that you can to achieve the outcome that you're going for, right? So if an output is the result of an activity, you add up all the results of this activity, you make a hypothesis, and then you hope at the end, like, please, can I achieve this outcome? Like, do all of these things in this order? Did I do them in the right way? Did I do them with the right people? Did I have the right information at the time? Did we achieve the outcome? But there is a disconnect, right? And so most teams focus on output because it's easier, because you're in control of it, and so you can measure it, and you can talk about story points flowing through the team, and you can talk about the throughput and the velocity or the cumulative flow. You can talk about all of these things. T-shirt size, whether or not you're doing backlog grooming. Did you groom the backlog? Having design sort of up front. The waterfall, even if you're doing sprints, that doesn't mean that your process is not still waterfall driven in terms of handoffs between teams and between decision makers, right? All of these things are optimized for throughput because that's what the factory mindset has sort of enabled us to prioritize, right? And so hopefully, some of you out there might be thinking, not me. Like, I don't work at a team like this. Like, we are outcome driven. And chances are, if that's true, you probably have shorter backlogs. You probably obsess less over estimation and whether something was on time or on budget. You're probably talking to customers a hell of a lot more. And so if this is a team that you're on, you are outperforming your peers because you've realized that the outputs don't matter. They do. The outputs matter. But they're not the only thing that matters. What matters is the outcome and whether or not you're able to achieve that in the end, right? And so the list here on the left is taken from a sort of industry magazine, which is like, what are the qualities of a great factory worker? Are you on time? Do you have a great attitude when you show up? Are you reliable? Are you ambitious? Can you communicate? Strong work ethic, right? And what you see on the list on the right, I think this is from a Google study, I want to say, but this is the list of the qualities of a great software developer. It's quite a stark contrast between what we expect of factory workers and what we expect out of software engineers. And so how do we build a great product and engineering org? If you treat them like professional athletes, and you treat your organization as if you're building a world championship ring-winning organization, then the mental model and the tips that you use to construct the team, to hire, to train, to grow, all of those analogies will serve you much better, because in the championship organization, you know what the outcome is that you're looking for. You want to win. Like, you want to win the game, and sometimes, you lose the game. And sometimes the game that you lose, you can win the championship anyways, right? And so being able to take that approach helps substantially. Because at the end of the day, building software products is a creative act and not a repetitive one, not a manufacturing one, right? And so what most product teams do, right? They care deeply about their craft. They need to be highly aligned to the problem they're trying to solve, winning the championship. They need to be highly autonomous, right? There's only so much that you as a manager or your manager can do to make sure that you type the right lines of code in the right order in the right moments, right? You have to be able to make the call. You have to have the context to know what the trade-off is and what's going to happen, right? And last and finally, but not least, you win or lose as a team, right? Like, we know that this is a team sport. We know that building software is a team sport. No single individual can do it. And when you take that approach to building teams and you think about that as a whole, then what you end up with is a much better situation. And so here's some stats. This kind of pains me. So because I actually don't like Steph Curry. I'm a Clevelander. And so LeBron James, like I should have replaced these with LeBron stats, but the analogy works nonetheless, which is at the top you can see his line-by-line stats. And at the bottom you can see the Golden State Warriors record and the stats of each game. Now, some games Steph played great, and some games he didn't. But what you cannot do is look only at Steph's stats and determine whether or not the Warriors won the game. Right? Is this video? All right, so there's a YouTube link in here. When we share the slides, you'll be able to watch it. But what's not showing here is there's a clip of Giannis, who I think a reporter asked him, what was the season a failure? Oh, there, maybe it's starting to load. Was the season a failure? Is what the reporter asks him, because they didn't make the playoffs that year. And Giannis says, there is no failure. There are just steps to success. Right? You have a bad game. You had a few bad games in a row. But to reflect back and to say, was it a failure, is missing the point entirely. And so the question I would ask all of you for your teams, whatever the goal is that you were trying to accomplish, whether it's a feature you're trying to ship, a capability you're trying to enable, when you don't get it, like when you don't make it, and you ask your team, like, well, was that a failure? Like, what would they say? What would they say? And so Giannis gets it, right? He's focused on the long game. He realizes you're going to win some and you're going to lose some. The question is, are we trying to get better at playing the game? Are we finding ways to improve? Are we helping each other? Are we learning along the way, right? The outcome in this case for Giannis was incredibly disappointing. And also, you can't win by pretending that you're awesome or that the outcomes weren't bad. The outcome was bad. He didn't win, right? But the answer to that problem is you work harder, you come back the next day, and you try again, right? So the other sort of part of this analogy that lends itself very well, this is Bill Walsh. So Bill Walsh joined the 49ers in 1978, and at the time they were 2-14. So they had won 2 games and lost 14, and they hired Bill Walsh. By 1980, so 2 years later, they were 6-10, and 3 years later, they were 13-3, which for American football is like a crazy, crazy turnaround. So 10 years, 3 championships, and set the organization up for success. And the way that he did this was by having a very clear standard of performance. So Walsh went to every employee in the 49ers organization, every single one, from the receptionist to the trainers to obviously his coaching staff, and told them very explicitly, here's how I need you to play. Like, here's how I need you to show up. Here's what it means, and here's what will happen if we all can show up in this way at the same time, working together towards the outcome. So you need to be very clear. What is the level of performance you're expecting? Is it 100 all of the time? Actually? Like, is it actually 100% peak performance level 100% of the time? It can't be, because that's not sustainable, and we know that that's not sustainable. So what is it, and how do you know when to flex it, right? You need to train, you need to practice, you need to continue to be learning and to help each other grow, right? If you can learn to play the game better and you can come together as an organization, you'll win championships, and that's exactly what Bill Walsh did. So, especially when it comes to building and leading teams, you have to trust that all of their hard work is all moving in the direction that you expect it to, towards that outcome, right? Your teams need to be communicating constantly. You cannot show up behind somebody's desk. I mean, now with remote, you certainly can't, but even still, you cannot always show up behind somebody's desk and say, hey, actually, if you do this instead, this will be better, right? And play by play and line by line. Like, no, your players have to play the game. You have to give them the tools to play the game, and you have to trust that they're going to work as hard as they can, and you'll coach them along the way. It's not a sports talk without a Vince Lombardi quote. So here's your Vince Lombardi quote for the day. But individual commitment to a group effort, right? That's what we're trying to do. And so because we have become obsessed with outputs, and because they give us this false sense of security, we have then removed autonomy everywhere in the name of false efficiency. Or said another way, we've removed creativity everywhere in the name of false efficiency. Instead, we should be inspiring autonomy through standards of performance, building teams aligned towards an outcome, telling them what good looks like, and trusting them, and getting behind them, and pushing as hard as you can to help them achieve their goals. This book, I'm sure some people in this room have probably read, DevOps Handbook. But imagine a world where product owners, development, QA, IT ops, InfoSec, they work together, a common goal, towards a common goal, fast flow of planned work, right? Hundreds or even thousands of deploys per day. Those highlighted groups on the left, that's your team. It's the whole thing. It's not just DevOps. It's not just SRE. It's not just because it's not a factory. Yes, there are processes involved. Yes, you should be constantly looking for ways to improve those, but do not get a false sense of security. If you're over-optimizing, the flow of outputs does not guarantee that you will win, and does not guarantee that it will add up to the outcome that you want. With that, I thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of the conference.